All right. How many of you guys, when you were, you've had seasons of life where you're really involved in something or really passionate about something? You got something that you're super excited about. Like for me, it was, I would take my family like video camera and I would take our family home like camcorder and make movies with it. And it was like the coolest thing since sliced bread. It was awesome. And like we would, mostly Star Wars movies, but some Jesus movies. Like we did one for a school project and it was the temptations of Jesus. And Jesus literally pulls out a lightsaber on the devil and makes the devil go away with the force. And it's pretty awesome. Like I used some After Effects and got some lightsaber stuff in there. So it looked like Star Wars, except made by a middle schooler, because it was. So it was pretty exciting, and so that was something that I was really into, and to be honest, I thought everybody was into, making cool movies and stuff until I realized they weren't, right? How many of you've been so passionate about something that you just kind of assumed everybody was passionate about that, and then you realized, oh, not everybody's passionate about that kind of thing. It's just me, right? That was one of those things for me. Something else I'm super excited about is Switchfoot. Anybody know what Switchfoot is? What is Switchfoot, to those of you that know? It's the greatest band ever. Yeah, just look up Meant to Live on Spotify, and Switchfoot, that's one of their biggest songs. It's like 15 years old now, but more than that. But it's still really, really good, and they're still coming out with new music all the time. So I'm looking forward to their Quarantine album that's going to come out sometime soon, hopefully. But I love them so much, I wore this shirt. Actually, this was a Father's Day gift this year. Chelsea got me they do an event every June called Bro-Am. It's to benefit like a lot of people. It's mostly to help the homeless in San Diego. And so they do a lot to help their community. That's where they're from. And so they have Bro-Am, and I got to watch their live stream concert. I got tickets for that because Chelsea bought that for me, and she bought it with the shirt. So I like it so much. I like to represent and wear my Switchfoot gear when I get the chance. And many of you can tell kind of what you're into by what you're wearing. Sometimes I see you guys wearing different Victory t-shirts, and I'm like, yeah, you know what life is about. No. And some of you are wearing sports shirts and maybe not today, but you wear stuff with jerseys on it that show what you're, like Corbin. But you can generally tell what people are into based on what they're wearing, right? You guys, would we agree with that? That lots of times you can tell by what they're wearing, what they enjoy, or things that they like. Last night at the bonfire event, I saw somebody with a Star Wars shirt on, and it was retro. It was like the old font from like 77, the original Star Wars. Yes, that's the shirt. So he knows. I wish he was wearing it now because it would have made my illustration way cooler. But this was the guy. If you don't believe me, ask him last night. And so anyway, ask him about it from last night. So anyway, we all have passions. We have all things that we like, and it means a lot when people know what our passions are because it means they know a little bit about us. So I want you to take a minute here. I want you to spend some time with your group, and I want you to talk a little bit about this, and then we'll come back up and we'll finish some of this lesson. All right, so we all have things that we care about. Some of us, we care about music. We have a favorite band or stuff that we like to listen to, or we like playing music. Some of us, we have maybe photography, or like me, videography passions. Maybe you have passion for art, or maybe just animals in general. You like to go and maybe you want to be a zoologist or something. You want to travel the world and study different animals. Maybe you have other passions and other giftings like sports or TikTok. How many of you have a passion for TikTok or dancing or dancing on TikTok, right? Because those are fun. But most of us, we have not only passions like that we care about, we also have things that matter to us, things that are a little bit deeper, things like kindness and things like the fruit of the Spirit, or things like getting good grades, or having lots of really good friends, or maybe a small batch of close friends. We have things that matter to us. Maybe maybe even just making people laugh. We got things that matter to us, and maybe those are one of the things, our core values. But sometimes we falsely make the assumption that if we care about something, then other people care about that as well. And as we get older, we discover maybe that's not true, but maybe we kind of go on the other side of it. Maybe we realize that other people don't really care about the things that we care about, but we think we know what other people care about. How many of you have been there? Based on maybe what somebody else is wearing, or based on like the little conversations you've had with them, or something like that. Maybe because you saw where they were on Snapchat, you think you have somebody figured out. But in reality, at the end of the day, it just comes down to assumptions. Maybe we don't. And the reality is, it can be easy to think that we have people figured out, but people are far more complex than what we see on the surface. And if we're honest, it's really easy to do this because it's just easier to put a label on somebody, because then we know how to treat them, right? If we know what they think, or if they know what they feel about this topic, or if we know how they feel about that, then we can just put a label on them and call it good, and then we know how to either treat them well or poorly based on that, or disregard them altogether. It can be really easy to stick labels on people and then to treat them like that, even if we don't truly know them. This is human nature. We do this because it's easier for us to comprehend things. It's easier for us to classify things and to break things down, make it simple in our minds so we don't have to remember everything. Because let's be honest, really getting to know somebody takes work. It's hard. You kind of have to remember the conversations that you have with them. You kind of have to listen when you're having conversations. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. These assumptions that we make about ourselves and about others helps us to know whether or not we fit in with them or they fit in with us. And sometimes we kind of leave people out, or we include people based on whether or not we think that they'll fit in, based on what we think we have figured out about the people around us. So this is really important, in not only in our relationships with each other, but this is going to pertain to our relationship with God as well, as we kind of tie this together a little bit this week. So I want you to take a few minutes. I want you to talk about these dynamics with your group as it plays out, and I'll give you like 3 to 4 minutes, because I want to make sure we get through everything. So small group leaders, that's you got 3 to 4 minutes, and then we'll continue on. All right, so kind of the theme today is this idea of vantage points. We have different vantage points. Everybody has a different vantage point. So when we think that we have people figured out, it's because we're only seeing them from a certain vantage point, from a certain point of view, from a certain perspective. There's actually a movie that was made like in 2008, I think, called Vantage Point. Have any of you seen this movie? I've got a poster of it here to show you, but it's got like Forrest Whitaker, Sigourney Weaver, Dennis Quaid. Like it was a good movie. So it's an action thriller movie, but basically the whole movie is the same 15 or 20 minutes replayed multiple times from different perspectives. And as it replays from different people's perspectives in the movie, you get a better understanding of what is actually happening in the bigger picture. And then it all kind of ties it together, all these perspectives at the very end of the movie, and it's like, and it's cool, and it's action-packed, and it's awesome. Actually, it makes me really want to rewatch this movie, because I haven't seen it since probably 2008. So, but it's really good, the idea of different vantage points. You only know what you know from your perspective. And if we want to get to know other people better, we have to see things from their vantage point, put ourselves in their shoes. And so, this week, we're going to continue talking about Zacchaeus. We talked about him first last week, but this week we're going to talk about him from a different vantage point. We're going to talk about the same thing that we talked about last week, but just from a different point of view, because it has a different point of impact. Last week we talked about how Jesus knows your name because you matter to him. And just like Zacchaeus, Jesus called him out. He singled him out in front of the crowd. And so to kind of recap the scene for you, Jesus is just entering into Jericho from traveling, and he's deep into his ministry. He's got these crowds that are following him. He's known as this guy who heals people, who raises dead people, who talks about God in a way that people haven't heard, and so people are drawn to Jesus. He's the most popular person in town, and the crowds have followed him as he enters into Jericho. And here's where we pick up the story. We pick it up in Luke chapter 19, starting verse 3. He, Zacchaeus, wanted to see who Jesus was. Remember, because the buzz was all about Jesus right now. But because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Now, if you remember last week, we talked about how the crowd probably viewed Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a what? Shout it out. Tax collector. Was a tax collector a good or a bad thing? This means good, this means bad. Was he okay, so did people generally like Zacchaeus because he was a tax collector? No, they did not. They did not like him at all because he was a tax collector. And so if anybody were to get along with Zacchaeus or want to spend time with Zacchaeus, it probably would not have been Jesus. Right? He would have not been the one to, the holy, God person that's healing people, that, teaches about this loving God who leaves, his 99 safe sheep in an open field to go find the one that's lost. This loving picture of a father who, people didn't imagine Jesus to want to hang out with, those dirty tax collectors. They imagined Jesus as the person who wanted to hang out with the people who got it right. But that's not who Jesus was, and it drove the religious people crazy. And so Jesus, actually, he calls out to Zacchaeus, and not only does this take Zacchaeus off guard, it takes the whole crowd off guard, because the crowd thought that they had Zacchaeus figured out. Imagine if you're sitting there in that crowd. Imagine today, you're sitting around in a crowd of people, and you're listening to somebody super spiritual and, an awesome preacher. Just imagine, okay? I know it's difficult. Imagine you're being preached to by a really awesome preacher that just nails it on the head every single time. You soak up every word that he says. You're on the edge of your seat. And then you got this person next to you who's just who seems to always mess up in class. He's always talking out. He's being weird. He gets detention every other day. And then even when you're in hybrid and you're on Zoom, he's the one that's falling asleep clearly on the Zoom thing because he thought the camera was off of him, but it was actually on him, and he was on mute, so you could hear him snoring too. This is the guy that you don't think, he doesn't pay attention to anything. In fact, that he's grounded half the time because he doesn't have his phone or his Chromebook in class because he's always getting into trouble. He's not the kid that you expect that preacher to say, "Hey, do you want to hang out afterwards?" But this is what Jesus does, and it shocks the crowd. In fact, Jesus is like, "Hey, I want to come have lunch with you." Is that cool? And Zacchaeus is, he says he welcomed him gladly. Jesus didn't let the assumptions of the crowd, the assumptions of Zacchaeus, because of what he did, tell him who Zacchaeus was personally or what really mattered to him. You could make the argument that money was the only thing that mattered to Zacchaeus because as a tax collector, he cheated people out of their money. So you could make the assumption that Zacchaeus only cared about money and wouldn't care about Jesus. But Jesus didn't let those assumptions matter. He knew that Zacchaeus actually was interested in what Jesus had to say, and he was interested in getting to know who he was. And Jesus knew Zacchaeus more than the assumptions led on, and so he spends time with him instead. How many times have we cast people aside in our minds or cast ourselves because we don't think that God treasures us? We don't think God knows what we actually care about. We kind of let our own assumptions of others or other people's assumptions of us define us. And the truth is, Jesus, he makes it personal for us. It's personal because Jesus knows what matters to you. Not only does he know your name, but he knows what matters to you, maybe even in spite of your reputation. He knows what matters to you, and therefore it's very personal. So I want you to talk about this personal Jesus with your group, and actually small group leaders, because we're short on time, I'm gonna skip ahead and give a couple personal application points, and then I'm gonna hand it over to you to finish off the time together. We can make it personal for ourselves because Jesus makes it personal to us. We can make it personal for ourselves by talking to Jesus about what matters to us. And secondly, we can make it personal with others and not let our assumptions of others dictate how we treat others. So I want you to start with one person that you think you already know things about, and start to maybe rewind in your head and try to give that person a clean slate in order to apply this week. So small group, you can take the sections, those two sections together, and talk about what you want in the next time that we have. Depending on how late service gets out downstairs, you'll have anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. So I'll hand it over to group leaders, and then groups, when you're done, I'll let you go ahead and close it off in prayer, and then we'll be done for this week. So thank you guys for coming. I'm going to hand it over to your small group leaders.